I woke up choking on sand. The air was thick, salty, and wrong. Waves crashed nearby, but the ocean wasn't blue, it was black like ink. I tried to stand, but my legs trembled. All around me stretched jagged rocks and twisted palm trees with leaves like brittle bones. The wind didn't sound right, it was too hollow, almost like it was whispering through something unseen. The last thing I remembered was, wait, I didn't remember. Not the trip here. Not how I fell asleep. Nothing. Just waking up in this place. I took a step forward, my bare foot sinking into the cold sand. It wasn't warm like normal sand. It felt damp, heavy, like it had soaked in something other than seawater. That's when I heard it. A wet, dragging sound. Then breathing, slow, heavy, and close. My pulse hammered in my ears. I turned. It was standing at the edge of the tree line. Tall. Thin. Its skin pale and stretched tight like wax pulled over bone. I couldn't see its face, just two sunken holes where eyes should have been. I froze, but it didn't move. Just stared. Then, without a sound, it stepped back into the shadows and was gone. I don't know how long I stood there staring at that spot. The ocean kept roaring behind me, but it felt like the whole island had gone still. I forced myself to move. I had to find water, shelter, answers. But as I walked, I kept noticing things that made my skin crawl. A trail of deep grooves in the sand, like something heavy had been dragged. A pile of seashells. No, not shells. Human teeth. And in the distance, carved into the side of a cliff, a door. The door was ancient, covered in strange symbols I didn't recognize. Some of them looked like eyes, some like screaming mouths. I swear I heard something moving inside. I stood in front of the cliff, my heartbeat pounding so hard it made my vision pulse. That door, it didn't belong here. The edges were too perfect, too sharp compared to the jagged stone around it, as if it had been placed here rather than carved. I stepped closer, brushing away some sand that had collected in the carved symbols. The moment my fingertips touched the surface, a deep, low vibration ran through the stone, like the island itself had just noticed me. I stumbled back, eyes darting to the tree line. The wind was still, but I had that feeling again. The feeling of being watched. Get a grip, I muttered under my breath, trying to shake off the paranoia. My voice sounded strange here, quieter, swallowed by the air before it could echo. I decided to keep moving along the cliff's base, staying close enough to feel the cold stone but far enough to keep an eye on the jungle. The trees here were wrong. Their trunks twisted in shapes that made no sense, some bent into perfect circles, others splitting into too many branches. The bark was covered in a thin gray moss that looked like ash. Every few minutes I found strange piles on the ground, bones. Not human. At least I told myself they weren't human. They were too long, too thin, with joint shapes I'd never seen before. Some still had shreds of blackened flesh clinging to them. The sun, if you could call it that, never seemed to move. It hung low in the sky, wrapped in a dull, sickly orange haze that gave no warmth. I had no idea if it was morning or evening. I walked until my legs ached, until my throat burned with thirst. Finally, I heard the faint sound of running water. I pushed through a wall of hanging vines and found a small stream winding through the rocks. I dropped to my knees and drank greedily. The water was cold, metallic, but it was water. That's when I heard it again. The breathing. This time closer. I turned my head slowly. Across the stream, half hidden in the shadows, it crouched. The pale, skin-wrapped thing. Its head tilted bird-like as if studying me. This close, I saw its mouth, a vertical slit that twitched open and shut, revealing rows of needle-like teeth. Neither of us moved for what felt like minutes. Then it placed one long, clawed hand into the water, never breaking eye contact. The water around its hand began to darken, not with dirt but with blood. I scrambled back, my hand catching on a rock. Pain shot up my arm, but I didn't stop until I was several yards away. When I looked back, it was gone again. Only the water remained, flowing red where it had touched it. I didn't sleep that night. I found a small overhang in the cliff and stayed there, curled up, clutching a piece of jagged stone I'd broken off earlier. Every sound in the darkness made my heart jump. The snapping of a twig, the rustle of leaves, the distant splash of something large moving through water. But somewhere deep in the night I heard something new. A voice. It was faint, almost blending into the wind, but I swear it whispered my name. At first I thought the voice was in my head. I stayed frozen, my back pressed against the cold stone, trying to convince myself it was just the wind. But then it came again, clearer this time, low, hoarse, and too human to be anything else. Help me. I gripped the rock shard tighter, forcing myself to stand. My legs trembled, but the sound pulled me forward. I followed it along the cliffside, past the stream, into a narrow crevice I hadn't noticed before. The gap was barely wide enough for me to squeeze through, my shoulders scraping against damp stone. The deeper I went, the colder the air became. The faint light outside faded, replaced by an oppressive darkness that pressed against my skin. Then I smelled it, the metallic tang of blood. The crevice opened into a small cavern, lit only by a thin shaft of that strange orange sunlight, filtering through a crack above. And in the center of the cavern, a cage. It wasn't metal, it was made of thick, blackened bones lashed together with strips of something that looked like dried sinew. Inside, huddled in the corner, was a man. His skin was pale and stretched over his frame like wet paper. His eyes flicked open when he saw me, and for a second, pure terror flashed across his face. You shouldn't be here," he rasped. His voice cracked, every word sounding like it cost him pain. I stepped closer, scanning the strange locks that bound the cage. "I can get you out." "No." His voice rose in sudden panic. "If you break this, it will know." "What will know?" I asked, my own voice dropping to a whisper. He stared past me toward the darkness beyond the cavern's mouth. His lips trembled as he forced out the words. "It doesn't let anyone leave." Before I could ask more, something heavy slammed against the stone behind me. Dust rained from the ceiling. The man's eyes went wide with terror. "It's here." The sound came again, a wet, dragging shuffle. A slow inhale, like something savoring the moment before a kill. I spun around, and through the narrow slit of the crevice I saw it. The pale creature, its head tilted, one long claw scraping against the rock as it crept closer. I turned back to the man, desperate. There has to be another way out. His face twisted into something between pity and resignation. "There is, but you won't like it." And before I could press him, the light from the crack above flickered, as if something massive had moved across it. The air in the cavern turned ice cold. The creature was at the entrance. The creature's head bent low to peer inside. Its skin looked like stretched wax, veined and pulsing faintly in the dim light. Where its eyes should have been, there were only two sunken pits, and yet I knew it could see me. The man in the cage began muttering something under his breath, his voice trembling, words spilling too fast for me to understand. The creature's clawed hand reached inside the crevice, the bones scraping the stone wall with a shriek that made my teeth ache. I stepped back, my heel crunching on loose gravel. The sound made the creature freeze. Then, slowly, its head snapped toward me. That's when the man shouted, "Run!" The thing lunged forward, its arm shooting into the cavern. I dove to the side just in time, feeling the air whip past as its claws sliced through where I'd been standing. The bars of the cage rattled as the man inside screamed. I didn't think. I bolted deeper into the cavern, praying there was some way out. The tunnel twisted downward, the air growing colder with every step. Behind me, the creature's movements echoed, the sound of something too big for these spaces forcing itself through anyway. I turned a sharp corner and nearly fell into a pit. The floor had collapsed, revealing an underground chasm. Down below, a faint blue glow shimmered like bioluminescent algae. A narrow ledge ran along the side, my only option. I pressed myself against the wall and shuffled sideways, every step making my heart hammer. Halfway across, the creature slammed into view behind me, its face stretching into something like a grin. It moved faster now, skittering across the wall like an insect, its limbs bending in ways no living thing should. I made it to the other side and scrambled into another tunnel. The blue glow was stronger here, and as I rounded the bend, I saw where it came from, an underground lake. The water was eerily still, and in the center stood a stone pillar carved with strange, spiraling runes. For a moment I almost forgot about the thing chasing me. The pillar radiated warmth, and something in me wanted to touch it. But then, from the shadows across the lake, the creature stepped out, slow, deliberate, as if it knew I had nowhere left to run. And then, something unexpected happened. The runes on the pillar flared brighter, and a deep, resonant voice echoed inside my skull. "You are not the first." The voice reverberated through my bones, making my knees buckle. I looked around, but there was no one else in the cavern. Just me, the pillar, and the thing stalking toward me across the water's edge. "You are not the first," it repeated, but this time the words felt closer, inside my head. My pulse was racing so hard I could hear it in my ears. The creature froze at the sound, its head tilting like a predator hearing another predator's call. Then it did something strange, it stepped back. The voice pressed on. "The island remembers. The island binds. Touch the mark or be taken." I didn't know why, but my hand was already reaching toward the spiraling runes. The stone burned cold under my fingers, and in an instant, the lake erupted in light. A shockwave burst outward, slamming the creature into the wall. It screeched, not in pain but in fury, before scrambling out of sight into the tunnels above. I was gasping for air, my hand still pressed against the pillar. The glow faded slowly, leaving the cavern in darkness again. Then, from somewhere behind me, a whisper. "Now you owe us." I spun around, nothing. Just the black water lapping quietly against the shore. I didn't wait to find out what "owe us" meant. I backed away from the pillar and followed the only other tunnel leading upward, my boots slipping on the damp rock. The climb felt endless. My muscles burned, and every sound, every drip of water, every gust of wind, felt like footsteps behind me. Finally, I saw faint daylight ahead. I emerged onto a ridge high above the island. From here I could see the jagged coastline, and something else. In the center of the island, rising like a spine from the earth, was a massive stone tower. It was too symmetrical to be natural. Even from here I could see figures moving at its base. Not the creature, these were human. Or at least they looked human. One of them turned toward me. And even from this distance I swear he smiled. His smile didn't feel welcoming. It felt like someone had just found their prey. I crouched low behind a cluster of sharp black rocks, trying to keep out of sight. The wind up here was strong, carrying the distant sound of the waves, but also something else, a faint hum. It was coming from the direction of the tower. I risked another glance. The figures at its base moved with a strange rhythm, almost synchronized, like they were all part of some silent ceremony. Their heads turned at the same time, their hands moved in the same way. The man who had smiled was still staring right at me. He hadn't moved an inch. I don't know why, but I couldn't look away. My chest tightened. My vision tunneled. And for a moment I swear I felt my feet start to move on their own, like something was pulling me toward him. Then, a rustle behind me. I spun around, expecting the creature from the cavern, but it wasn't that. It was a girl. Her clothes were ragged, her hair tangled and streaked with dirt, but her eyes were sharp, full of urgency. She pressed a finger to her lips and whispered, "If you want to live, don't look at him." Before I could speak, she grabbed my wrist and yanked me down the slope, away from the ridge. My boots slipped on the loose gravel, and I nearly fell headfirst into a patch of thorny bushes. We didn't stop until the tower was out of sight. Only then did she release my wrist and glance back over her shoulder. "They can feel it when you see them," she said, catching her breath. "You stare too long and you're theirs." I opened my mouth to ask who they were, but the answer came in the form of a deep, echoing horn from somewhere near the tower. The girl froze, her face pale. "They know you're here now," she whispered. The horn's call rolled over the island like thunder, low and vibrating in my chest. Somewhere in the jungle below, a chorus of voices answered, not shouts, not words, just a drawn-out, guttural chant. The girl's grip tightened on my arm. "We have to move. Now." She pushed through the twisted undergrowth, every step making the branches snap and scrape against my arms. The blackened leaves crumbled at our touch, releasing a dry, metallic smell into the air. Behind us I could hear movement, not the sound of one or two people but dozens. Fast. Coordinated. "They're coming," I muttered, trying not to let panic take over. "They don't stop," she replied without turning. "Once they mark you, you're not supposed to leave the island." The trees thinned ahead and we stumbled into a clearing. In the middle stood a massive stone, easily 10 feet tall, carved with strange spirals and jagged lines that seemed to twist the longer I looked at them. "This way," she said, ducking behind it. She crouched low, pulling a piece of vine aside to reveal a narrow opening in the ground, a tunnel entrance. I hesitated, peering into the pitch-black hole. Where does it lead? Somewhere they can't follow. The sound of footsteps was closer now, heavy, measured, and impossibly in sync. Through the trees I caught glimpses of pale faces, each one turned toward us, eyes wide and unblinking. The girl didn't wait for my answer. She slid into the tunnel and disappeared. I swallowed hard, dropped to my knees and crawled in after her. The air inside was damp, stale, and cold. The walls of the tunnel pulsed faintly, like they were breathing. I forced myself not to think about it, focusing on the dim light ahead. When we emerged, it wasn't into a cave. It was a massive underground chamber, with walls lined by wooden masks, each one carved into a grotesque, twisted face. The girl finally looked at me. "They're not the worst thing on this island," she said quietly. "What hunts them, hunts us too." And then, from deep within the chamber, something knocked back. The knock came again, slow, deliberate, echoing through the chamber like it was inside my skull. The masks on the walls seemed to tremble with the sound, their hollow eye sockets watching. The girl's voice was barely a whisper. Don't answer it. I frowned. Answer what? There's nothing there. Before I could finish, something heavy slammed into the far wall from the other side. Dust rained down from the ceiling, and the wooden masks began to creak as though straining against invisible nails. She grabbed my hand and pulled me deeper into the chamber, toward a narrow corridor carved into the rock. As we moved, I noticed that some of the masks had mouths open just wide enough for something to slide through. Where are we going? I demanded, my voice low but urgent. To the Watcher's Gate, she replied without looking back. It's the only place they won't cross. The corridor twisted like the inside of a serpent, each turn narrower than the last. The air grew colder, and I could feel a faint vibration beneath my palms as I brushed the walls. Halfway through, I heard it, footsteps again. But these weren't the synchronized steps from before. These were heavier, slower, and wet. The girl froze. That's not them, she murmured. A shadow spilled across the wall ahead, long insect-like limbs bending at impossible angles. Something scraped along the stone, sending a shiver up my spine. Then a voice, not human, not animal, but a fractured imitation of speech, whispered my name. I didn't wait to see it. We ran. The corridor ended at a massive stone arch half buried in rubble. Strange markings glowed faintly across its surface, pulsing in rhythm with my heartbeat. The girl pressed her palm against the center of the arch, and the air inside shimmered like water. They can't pass through, she gasped. But once we go in, we can't come back. The footsteps behind us quickened, closing the distance. I turned just in time to see a pale, multi-jointed arm reach around the corner. Without thinking, I grabbed her and leapt into the shimmering light. For a heartbeat, there was nothing. No sound, no ground beneath my feet, just a suffocating darkness. And then I opened my eyes. To see a second island. Bigger. Darker. And on the shore, dozens of towering shapes stood watching us, each wearing the same grotesque masks from the chamber. The girl's voice trembled. We weren't supposed to come here. The air here was thicker, heavier, like breathing through damp cloth. The sky above wasn't the same pale gray as the first island. It was almost black, swirling with faint streaks of violet light that pulsed like veins. The figures on the shore didn't move. They stood in perfect stillness, their grotesque masks angled toward us. Some of the masks were cracked, revealing glimpses of something moving beneath, pale flesh, glistening eyes that weren't human. The girl gripped my arm so tightly her nails dug into my skin. They're the keepers, she whispered. They watch everything, waiting. For what? I asked, my voice shaking. For the gate to open again. And now, they've seen us. One of the keepers tilted its head with a sickening crack. Then another followed. And another. Within seconds, all of them had turned their heads in perfect unison toward the point where we stood. The girl yanked me toward a jagged cliffside path. We have to get to the spire before nightfall. If we're outside when the dark tide comes. She stopped mid-sentence. A sound rolled across the island, deep, guttural, and impossibly low, like the earth itself was growling. Made my stomach churn. I turned to look back at the shore. The keepers were no longer there. They're moving, she said, barely audible. And if they've disappeared, it means they're already ahead of us. We started running along the cliff. Below, waves the color of ink crashed violently against the rocks. The wind carried a strange scent, not salt but metallic like rust and blood. Why is this place worse than the first island? I asked between breaths. She glanced at me, her face pale. Because here, the thing that hunted you, isn't the most dangerous creature anymore. Before I could respond, something shifted in the water below. Massive, serpentine shapes slid beneath the surface, breaking the waves with spines the size of trees. The path narrowed to less than a meter wide. One wrong step and we'd fall into the black water. That's when I heard it again, the wet, dragging footsteps from the first island. I spun around. From the mist behind us, a tall, distorted silhouette emerged. Long insect-like arms, and in its claws, a mask torn from one of the keepers. The girl's eyes widened in horror. It followed you here. It tilted its head as if amused. Then it spoke, voice like bone scraping against stone. You opened the wrong door. And in the distance, from somewhere deep within the island, a bell began to ring. The bell's sound was wrong. It didn't echo like metal, it vibrated through my bones like it was inside my skull. Each strike made my vision blur for a fraction of a second. The creature took a single step toward us, its claw dragging across the stone wall, leaving deep, smoking grooves. The air around it shimmered like heat haze, though the wind was freezing cold. The girl shoved me forward. Run. Don't look back. We tore along the cliffside path, our feet slipping on wet stone. Behind us, the bell grew louder, but now there was another sound mixed with it. A deep, wet breathing. Slow. Patient. The path suddenly ended in a stone archway carved into the cliff. The inside was pitch black, smelling of damp earth and something rotting. In there? I hesitated. Yes, she hissed. It's the only way to the spire. I stepped inside and instantly the sound of the bell vanished. Instead, I heard whispers. Dozens of them from every direction. My skin crawled. The voices weren't speaking in any language I knew, but somehow I understood. You don't belong here. The girl struck a small match, revealing walls covered in symbols. Some looked like they'd been burned into the rock, others carved by claws. One symbol, a crude circle with 3 vertical lines, seemed freshly made, still wet with a black liquid. What's that? I asked. She didn't answer. She just pressed her fingers to her lips, motioning me to stay silent. Then, the match went out. Complete darkness. Something moved behind us. Not footsteps, crawling. I turned, straining to see, when a faint light appeared ahead. A narrow beam like moonlight through a crack. The girl ran toward it and I followed, heart hammering. We burst out of the tunnel into a small, ruined courtyard at the base of the spire. The structure loomed above us, impossibly tall, its top hidden in the black sky. That's when we saw them. The keepers, all of them, standing in a perfect circle around the courtyard. Their masks gleamed faintly in the dark. The girl froze. This isn't possible. They shouldn't. One of the keepers stepped forward, mask cracking slightly. From inside, a pale, eyeless face pushed through the opening. It smiled. Welcome home. The courtyard was silent, except for the slow, synchronized breathing of the masked figures. The girl gripped my arm so hard her nails dug into my skin. The one who had spoken, the pale, eyeless face, stepped closer. Its smile didn't move, but I felt the words in my head. You've been here before. My mouth went dry. No. I've never. Images slammed into my mind. Flashes of this very courtyard. My hands, older, dirtier, carrying the same masks these creatures wore. My voice chanting words I didn't understand. And then, a door of pure blackness closing in front of me. I stumbled back, gasping. This isn't real. The eyeless figure tilted its head. It was real then. It is real now. The other keepers moved as one, each lifting their mask just enough to reveal the same featureless, pale skin beneath. All smiling. The girl whispered, "Run." But I couldn't. My legs wouldn't obey. The eyeless figure reached out, its cold fingers brushing my cheek. For a heartbeat, the courtyard vanished, replaced by endless darkness, the sound of the ocean distant, muffled. I was standing on the deck of a boat, but I was the only one there. The shore was gone. The sky was empty. You left us once, the voice echoed inside me. You won't leave again. When I blinked, I was back in the courtyard, surrounded. The girl was gone. The gates were gone. There was only the spire, towering over me, and the circle of smiling faces closing in. The last thing I felt was cold hands on my back, pushing me toward the spire's black entrance. And then, nothing.